Welcome back to my new video. This is Dan and this is Jake. We just had a behind the scenes shoot. I used the 85mm lens on a Canon 6D, and then Jake, what kind of equipment were you using today?
I was using a macro lens. I was using a macro lens.
Macro lens on like what kind of body?
Nikon 3200.
Nice. So yeah, so today we were out in downtown Wheeling. I picked this spot and then Jake happened to tag along and use his camera, and then Dan was the model for today. You want to talk about your experience? How was the weather? How was the posing?
Cold. We did do some leaning shots today. We did do some bench shots. Luckily we got to go into the CMX today.
Yeah, actually it was nice enough. Like they said that they gave us permission to shoot in there, so super cool. I appreciate that. That's always welcome. And yeah, usually if you're shooting in like an inside area, always just ask for permission. Just make sure that you're not getting kicked out, even though I've been kicked out many times. But yeah, it happens. But yeah, overall, like the outside stuff, I think it was pretty good. There was shadows that kind of like blocked the sun out. So if you were like obviously if Dan was in the shot, like in the shadows, like there's no, harsh light bouncing off. And then inside there was actually like nice like shadows going off where like you could actually like get some cool like vibes going. What I wanted to mention that I also forgot to add when I was talking with Dan and Jake was that we also used a reflector. I wanted to use an off-camera flash in this kind of scene, but the thing is that it was still too bright in my personal opinion, and I think at that point in time we just like couldn't use the flash. It like honestly just like wouldn't make sense to me. So I thought what we could do is just bring a reflector. So Jake happened to bring his reflector, so I was like, okay, cool, like let's use it, let's kind of work our magic here. And honestly, like it helped significantly. I did not realize how much it was gonna help because we were in the shadows. Obviously it's gonna not bring enough light into the photo. So what I would recommend to people is to just like have a reflector, or maybe have something that can bounce off some light if you are taking some photos with some shadow going on. CMX was super nice to let us like take photos there. Obviously they didn't need to. They could have just like easily kicked us out, but one of the employees asked for permission from the boss, and we kind of talked to them and just said, hey, we're just doing it for fun. As long as we don't take pictures of any of the customers or make them feel uncomfortable, then it's fair game for us. So it was super nice. It was kind of nice to get out of the cold a little bit and just be able to take some photos inside, because usually I just take outdoor shots. So it was kind of an interesting thing to focus on doing some indoor shots rather than doing some outdoor. So now that the photo shoot is over, we're gonna go into Lightroom and start editing this photo. Now this was probably my favorite photo out of this session. What I really liked about this photo is that Jake happened to have a reflector, and you can obviously tell that there's some light coming in. Simply if you look into the eyes, you can see in the bottom left corner that there's some light coming in. So Jake had been more prepared than I was and had a reflector, so that obviously bounced a lot of light. We were in the shadows, so this caused a lot of darkness in the shot, but since Jake had that reflector and was shining it and bouncing the sun into Dan's face, it actually worked perfectly, and I think that this is an amazing shot. This is the before portion of the photo that we had. I think it looks pretty good by itself. There was just a couple things that I wanted to edit out, and this is the after. So what I had done is, if we go into the panel and kind of see what we're doing, I think I did do a lot of highlights. I brought that down only because I thought that the light that was coming in was pretty much like
too much, and I think it caused Dan to look a little pale. So if you bring that down a little bit, you're going to enhance and add more dimension and clarity into the photo. I did bring the white speck up though, only because I wanted to really make Dan's eyes pop, because he has this like kind of hazel eye, and if you look at the before portion, you can't really like notice that well. So I later on in this edit, I kind of just brought them back up, and you can really, there's a huge difference between the before and the after in this portion. So the next thing that I did is I thought that the before portion was really good, but I really wanted to create a different sort of feel to the photo. So what I had done is if you go into the color panel over here on the right hand side, I made it a little bit cooler. This obviously is a winter shot. We had taken it when it was very cold, so I kind of still wanted to give that illusion that it was cold. So I had taken it down a little bit, but if you bring it back up, what you notice is that it's gonna cause Dan's left hand side to look a little more yellow, and this is like obviously not good. So obviously when you're working on a photo, you just really want to tweak it and see where you're going with it, and pay attention to the skin. So obviously if I go more blue, you're gonna notice that the pink in his face really shows up, and if I go to the yellows, it's really gonna enhance the freckles that he has. So I think the happy medium that I had was something along the lines of here, where it's not too much yellow going on his face, but also just enough, there's not enough pink that distracts from the image. Now, what I think is really important in an image is that obviously this is no fault in Dan, but I did notice that there was a little bit of scars and a little bit of blemishes in his face at that time, and I just wanted to remove those only because I thought that I wanted to enhance the photo, and I think the best way to do that is to just like get rid of blemishes and really focus on the person's face. So if I go into the right hand side over here, there's a little band-aid, so you just tap on that, and pretty much what I did through this entire process is just kind of focused on all of the blemishes that are in those areas, and made sure that everything that I wanted to enhance was increased in the clarity, and then everything that I did not want was just removed. So pretty much you had that little scar on his forehead over there, so I got rid of that. There's a little bit of blemishes on his cheeks and near his chin, so I just got rid of that as well. And there was a little bit of blemishes near the neck, probably due to shaving. Sometimes that happens, so what we had just done is just got rid of that. Last thing that I want to add is if you go into the right hand side over here, right below the band-aid, there's this little circle with a little bit of like texturing on the inside. So if you tap on that, this essentially allows you to kind of select a specific part of the image and kind of just tweak it to the way that you want it, so you're focusing on a specific element rather than the entire image itself. So what I had done, which is super important in this photo, I think, is I had just clicked on the plus icon, and I used on the left hand side this little like brush. So essentially, if you have a stylus, or if you could just use your finger, you can drag over a specific portion that you want and just select what you need and what you want to enhance. So what I had done is I tapped on that little pen icon, and I had just drawn right over the eyes. And I think what you really need to do when it comes to the eyes, especially in a photo like this, when you really want to make the eyes pop, is you have to increase the exposure as well as increasing the clarity and the sharpness. And the reason why you want to do this is because obviously when you're staring at a portrait, you want to pay attention to the eyes, right? And you want the eyes to be the focal point. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to make sure it's as bright as possible, as clear as possible, and you want to make sure that they look as best as possible. So you pretty much, like, any tip that I could give for any type of portrait is just to always bring the clarity up. Make sure when you go into the effects, you bring let me backtrack. If you go into the light, you have to bring the exposure up. If you go into the effects panel, you have to bring the clarity up. And then when you go into the detail, you have to bring the sharpness up. Now, what I have to mention is that when you go into the clarity, the more in clarity that you bring up, the darker that the eyes get. And I'm not exactly sure why this is, but I think it's just because you're really enhancing all of the elements of the portion that you selected. So what I recommend first is just to bring the clarity up first, because this is going to make them very dark, and then from there use the exposure and kind of just set it to the way that you want it. Now obviously if you do it too high, it just gets very weird and creepy, so you kind of have to have a happy medium where you think it's like appropriate enough that it's not too obvious that the photo has been super enhanced, but also not enough that it looks kind of like a lizard and like really creepy. I had drawn over Dan's face specifically. I believe it was this one. So what I had done is, let me see if I could show you guys what I had done. Okay, so if as you can see, I kind of went over all of the elements that I want to soften. The thing that you want to focus on is make sure you don't go directly over the eyes. Remember that you had just brought the clarity up and you had brought everything up to make sure that the eyes stand out, so you obviously do not want to go over the eyes. Other things that you don't want to go over is mouth and nostrils, because this does make it look weird, and you want to make sure that it's just the skin that you're focusing on. So you got to make sure that you're doing the forehead. You also still have to do the neck, and you have to do the chin. So from there, what I had done is I went into the effects panel, dropped down the clarity, and then I went into the sharpness, and I also brought down the sharpness. Now this is pretty much like the cheater way version of doing skin smoothing in Lightroom rather than going into Photoshop, and this is kind of what I've been using so far. I kind of like it. I think it works really well, and pretty much like my kind of clientele that I have is a pretty younger generation, and I think that this is pretty much like a cheat way to skin smooth without going into Photoshop. Now actually, when I'm looking back at this photo, I realized that what I didn't like about the nose was that it was very red, and obviously it's only because it was very dark and very, very cold. So obviously your skin is going to start reacting to the weather that you're in. So one of the things that you can combat, especially if you're doing photos in the winter, is go back to this little circle icon over here on the right hand side, tap on the plus icon, and just drag over the elements that you think is too red. So obviously I thought it was just the nose portion, and then from there you go into the color panel right here and you bring down the green. So obviously you see that there's this pink on the right hand side, and this, if you go into the greens, it's going to counteract whatever you want. So obviously when we had gone into the blues, you made it more blue, and you're counteracting the yellow that was going on in the entire photo. Whereas with this green, you're counteracting the pinks or the reds that's happening in the skin.
One of the things that I could say for an improvement is to just, ask for permission. Honestly, I didn't expect us to be that cold when we were like out shooting. So if I am planning on doing something outside when it is kind of cold, I would recommend to just, find some nearby places and just like immediately ask for permission. I know that obviously this can be like uncomfortable sometimes, but as long as you get permission, like from there, you don't have to worry about getting kicked out. So that's always a plus. And as always, I want to thank everyone who is helping me out. I want to thank Jake for taking some additional photos. If he lets me, I will post some over here if he's done with them already. I want to thank Dan for modeling and helping us out. He obviously did not have to be helping us and modeling us in this super cold weather, so it's always appreciated. And I will link both of their Instagrams right here if you do want to check them out. I highly recommend it. And yeah. And that's the end of the video. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get notified every time I post a new video. Obviously, check out my Instagram page at Markiewicz Photos. And then, do you guys have any pages to shout out?
Yeah, you can check out my Instagram page at Different Age Photography.
And you can check me out at KOZUB Dan, Kozub Dan. That's my little personal Insta.
Hopefully I'll have everything in the bottom, so I'll remember all of that. But yeah, hopefully you guys will check out my next video. Take care.
See ya.